I'm here with Gary Cerveny, and we are at the 2024 Amelia Concours, and he brought a very unique car with him, which has certainly exterior design is 100% unique. And Gary, tell me a little bit about this car. Let's talk about what it came from and what you call it.
Okay, well, it's the Norman TIMBS Special. It was designed and built by Norman TIMBS. He started in about 1947, finished it in 48. Emil Dietz did the entire aluminum body to Norman's design. He was an aerospace and IndyCar designer. He did all the Keck family cars, the Blue Crown Special cars, the Shrike Hallebrand cars. In fact, he's actually the engineer that designed the Hallebrand quick change rear end and the Hallebrand wheels, even though Hallebrand took credit, but it was Norman who did it. So he's a very underknown, phenomenal engineer.
Let's say, right?
But he built this car strictly for himself. He spent roughly $10,000 in 1947, so about the price of a house and a half or maybe two houses in California. He lived in Van Nuys at the time. The aluminum body was made out of 147 individual pieces that were hand pounded by Emil Dietz and then welded together. And he also was the first person to ever spray flake. Well, he took 3 1-ounce gold coins, which weren't worth that much back then, but at any rate, he ground them up very fine. And of course, they had to be kept in suspension in the paint. So he designed a Bink spray gun where he put little paddles inside the can and he air drove them separately to have them turn to keep the gold in suspension to spray it. He then sent the gun back to Binks and suggested that they make one. He didn't want to patent it or anything. He just thought people should have it because he thought flake was interesting. Binks said they had no interest, but 2 years later came out with the first commercially available flake spray gun.
Wow.
So,
okay, well, let's have a look in the cockpit real quick.
For a nearly 19-foot long car, it has a place that 3 fairly trim people can fit in. So there's not much room. Because he was an IndyCar designer and had access, a lot of the gauges were IndyCar gauges. Higher tacks were higher RPM, 8,000 instead of the typical 5,000 tacks. Very hard to find gauges. Unfortunately, we've had to find them twice now.
Wow.
And then have them restored.
Wow. And obviously there are no doors, so you step up on the side.
Well, he has step plates, and his idea, I think, was to step on them. We do not. We step clear over. There is framework under it, but I don't trust it.
Right.
So we step over. Of course, to get access to the engine, he wanted it as smooth as possible. He hinged the back section.
Oh, yeah.
He used a 1947 Buick straight 8 crate engine.
Okay.
And then he put, from earlier cars, they had what was called compound carburation and compound exhaust, which was basically dual carburetors and dual exhaust. So he took those off a 46 engine, mounted them on this engine.
Okay.
Then after the transmission, of course, all he had left was room for a U-joint to the rear end, which left him with no drive shaft for suspension. So he designed his own swing rear end like a DD-own style.
Yeah.
And he made it out of Ford and Packard parts himself. This is the original rear end.
Wow.
We've been able to restore it both times.
A single transverse spring?
Yep. And then he has the fuel tank back here and the spare tire. And you'll notice that the tubing, the lower frame tubing, a little hard to see over here because it's black, but it's very large diameter. He pressurized the tubes to make them more rigid. You can see the pressure gauge here. And he would pressurize the frame before he would go on a drive, and it also honked the air horns.
Oh, you're kidding. So he used the frame as a giant air tank.
There's a giant air tank, and his idea was it would stiffen the frame slightly. I'm not dead sure that did much.
Right.
But it gave him place to store air to honk air horns.
What a fascinating and unique idea.
So,
that is crazy. And so you do have dual exhaust out of the straight 8?
Yep. You can see them coming down here.
Absolutely. Yes, sir. Well, that is a fascinating
You can probably see the air filters on top, which actually came from a race boat.
Yeah.
The spark arresters. They don't really filter out anything but the big pieces.
Wow. So, okay. So the next question is, how did you come about this car?
Well, there was an auction at the Peterson Museum held by Barrett Jackson. And we were there. My wife was interested in a Ferrari. It was coming up later. And this car had just come out of the movie industry. And it was there, supposedly going to sell for $50,000 or thereabouts, what the auction catalog said. And I sometimes help out the auctioneers. So I threw out a couple little bids, and I was talking to a friend, wasn't paying any attention. And all of a sudden he bumps me and he says, "Hey, they're dropping the hammer on you." So I ended up buying it for $15,000.
My goodness.
With commission, it was $17,200. But I had no idea what I had bought. So I went and looked at it. I thought, well, what the heck? We'll do I don't know what this is. It's a nice body style. We'll do a quick restoration, and maybe we'll run it on the Hot Rod Power Tour.
Sure.
Well, when we took it home, we started doing some research, and then we found out who had actually built the car and who he was. And we found his son, who's also an engineer who lives in Central California. And he had his father's original picture book from building it.
Really?
So he allowed us to copy all the pictures, and that was good and bad. The good part was we knew exactly how Norman had built the car. The bad part was we knew exactly how he built it and all these parts that he used that were extremely hard to find.
Now you were obligated for a much more difficult
Now we're obligated. So instead of a 6-month quickie whack job, we spent 7.5 years.
Wow.
My family, who'd done all of our own restorations other than paint and upholstery on all our cars, we spent 4 years and finally gave up. So we sent it to a place in Colorado called Custom Auto. They're no longer in existence, for a 1-year finish up. It took them another 3.5. And then in 2010, it debuted here in Amelia Island a week after they finished it in Colorado. Bill Warner had been campaigning us for a couple of years to bring it here first, so
right.
We promised him we would.
Excellent.
And then, of course, in 2018, the Woolsey Malibu fire came through, took our house and 76 cars and motorcycles. This is the only one we decided had to be rebuilt.
Okay.
The grill on bell cranks and little tubes, and then it goes to the back. You can see all the stuff that goes down the sides.
Back there. Okay. I
To,
didn't ask about that. That's interesting.
Operate it.
Yeah, when you have a mid-engine vehicle, you've got to work those things differently.
And it is truly mid-engine. So
yeah, almost precisely middle, right?
Yep. That was his whole design. And there's the radiator up front.
Yeah.
We did have to make a new radiator, but we made it exactly to look like the old one, even though you can't see it. There's a compound carburation.
Yep.
And then there's the wood buck.
Yep. And that's the only way you could possibly do it, I think.
Yeah, we're so lucky. And there's some of the little pieces.
How many pieces did you say?
147.
Wow. What a project. And to think you had to do it more than once.
Yeah.
Wow.
And you can see how they're all tapped, and then they're all welded, and the welds are all ground down on the outside.
Yep.
They're just partly ground on the inside, and this is making the...
and that hinge has to be engineered so it doesn't pinch as it goes up.
You see how bad the bumpers looked, but we were able to straighten them, and then
you were able to salvage them,
replate them.
Wow.
Here's the odometer. The instruments look like, and we started rebuilding them.
You're in the paint booth?
Yeah. So at any rate,
there you go.
Wow.
Starting the interior.
What a car, what a project.
Yeah.
And now, how is it to drive? What is it like to drive?
It's kind of like driving an older bus. The only thing you have to be aware of is you're so far forward. You have to be aware when you go around a corner to drive into the intersection and then turn.
Right.
If you turn like a regular car, you can take the inside rear wheel and drive over the curb.
Sure.
So, but other than that, it drives fine. It you know, it shifts easy, and it's a 3-speed stick.
And I guess the steering wheel's right over the front wheels, so that part is a tight linkage. Yeah. And then the shifting, is the shifting pretty tight, even though it's linked
It's very
back?
easy to do. It's basically a Ford column.
Okay.
We salvaged other parts, but this was the only full car. And we spent now at the Bothwell collection 4 years restoring it again.
Wow.
And we figured, well, this is where it should come for its second debut.
Sure.
So it's here again.
Wow. Well, thanks for bringing it out. What a remarkable car.
Yeah.
It's truly.
I'm going to go ahead and drop the back, and then you'll
if you don't mind,
see
that would
what
be
it
great.
is all the way down.
Yeah, let's see what it looks like down. Goodness. My gracious. Gary, thank you so much for showing us this spectacular car.